Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this members forum. Thank you for your support of our club over what has been, I think, a testing period since our last forum. This members forum will be recording, and we will be putting extracts of it onto the web, and that's why the camera is in front of me. For those of you that don't know, we have these members forums at the start of every single county championship game, and we'd like to continue to do that obviously throughout the whole season. In fact, I think there's some merit, if you prefer, to do this during the whole Royal London competition as well, because our aim, as always, is to be as open and transparent with you, and for everyone at our club to be as successful as they can be. We don't hide in good times or indeed in difficult times. Now, for those of you that don't fully understand how the club is run, there is a management and board structure on the website that explains really how the board operates, and indeed how the whole executive team operates as well. And we can print copies of that for you if you can't access the web. But I'm delighted to say today I'm joined by everybody that really runs this club. The whole executive team is headed by Sarah Glias, who's our company secretary, and also head of finance. We're also joined by Dave Hoskins, who's head of commercial, and we're also joined by Helen Greer as well, who's head of stadium. So all those people that make the operational decisions are here to answer any questions that you may have, and they'd also like to update you on what's gone on over the last month or two. I'm also delighted to have with us today Paul Pridgeon. Paul Pridgeon heads up the whole cricket steering group. That cricket steering group... Sorry, there's a bit of noise actually. Thanks. Paul Pridgeon heads our cricket steering group, and that cricket steering group includes Alex Gidman, Alan Richardson, Kevin Sharp. They make all the substantive cricket decisions, and I'm sure you'll have many questions for them. We've already received quite a few questions, and we will answer those as well, and we look forward to answering your questions once Sarah and her team have spoken, and indeed once Paul has spoken. I will chair this meeting, but before I hand over to Sarah, I wanted to say a few words, not least because I think it's important that I clear up a few things. The first thing I'd like to say is that we all care hugely for this club, and we all want it to thrive. And we are all dreadfully disappointed with our performance in Whiteball. It has been a very poor campaign, and I personally find it both perplexing and baffling. Now, last season, at this point in the season, we had 2 games to go. The destiny was in our own hands. We had to just get 1 point, and we'd qualify for the quarterfinals, and that is our aim. We've now got 2 games to go, and obviously we're languishing at the bottom of the table, and that's clearly not good enough. Of course, sport is unpredictable, but we did say at the start of this year that we had all the levers in place for success, and we expected it, and we've clearly failed to deliver on that, and we need to understand why. I think it's fair to say on paper we have an excellent squad. 3 of the 100 finalists are in our squad, in Moeen, Pat Brown and Dylan Pennington. Add to that established international stars like Monroe and Bravo. Throw into the mix Barnard, Haynes, Cox, D'Oliveira. That's an impressive core. We expected top 4, and disappointingly we didn't get there. And I know Moeen on Friday referred to it as a lack of confidence. I kind of lean on Jonathan Liu of The Guardian. He described cricket as being a game of psychology and momentum in a burritos of numbers. That's all well and good, but we do need to understand why we have underperformed, and we do need to have a critical and robust review of what went wrong, and of course that will happen. The other point that I'd like to make is there's still lots and lots to play for. In Red Bull, we're there or thereabouts, and perhaps that's been epitomised by yesterday's performance. It demonstrated strong resolve, a resilience, a fight, and a good performance. And I hope that continues. And also, we have the Royal London competition as well. We're not losing many players to the 100, and therefore I think we have to perform well in that. But of course Paul will answer more substantive questions that you have on cricket. Those are my observations. Now off the pitch, I think lessons have been learnt, and the club needs to, I think, communicate a little bit better with you all. I think we need to signal things more in advance where possible, to properly explain the decisions that have been made so they don't come as a surprise to anyone. I think, as always, communication and an explanation as to why is as relevant as anything that is brought in. And I understand why there is a feeling amongst some of you that there's almost like a feeling that this is a club that can't rather than can. And I'll come back to that. The headlines and the feedback post our first full house, I think, in 4 or 5 years, against the Bears, was disheartening and displeasing. Now, I don't get involved in the micro decisions here. The message and approach, which was consistent with many other clubs, but it wasn't properly communicated, and obviously there was lots of kind of dissatisfaction, understandably so. I'm glad that policy was changed very quickly on the night. I actually, over that weekend, did some delving, and I've never done this before. I looked into the match day briefings for that event. Stewards and everybody has a very, very detailed kind of risk assessment match day briefings to explain what should and shouldn't be allowed. And I read those, and as I said, I've never done that before. And it was made clear in that briefing that bag searches should not be overly officious and snacks should be allowed. So when muffins are taken away, obviously that's hugely disappointing. And quite rightly, we got a predictable backlash, which I think was justified in some quarters, but not all. Now, the club has spoken to many of you personally about this, and email too. It didn't happen again, and it won't happen again. And clearly, that communication is the key there, and also not just externally, but also internally as well. I think it's important to note, though, that things will change in the future. Rules do change, and we will do all we have to do to make sure that we are safe and compliant. And it really, really is complex. It's far, far too complex to go into the details now in a members' forum, because it will literally take hours to explain to you the decision making that's occurred. So I don't propose to do that, but what I do think would have huge merits is if a selection of you put your hands up and volunteer to be members' representatives, that Sarah and Helen and Dave can explain to you at length why the decisions have been made, and you can perhaps understand the kind of risk assessments and everything else that we've had to do. It is remarkably complex. So I do urge you, perhaps after the end of this meeting, or indeed throughout the course of the next week or two, to get a members' representative together, and as I said, Sarah and Helen and Dave will go through that in lots and lots of detail. Now, any decision that the club makes, it's quite clear that there are consequences and compromises that always have to be made. And one example that I delved into recently was just to do with the turnstiles over there at the cathedral site, because I've been to many of these members' forums and we've had quite a lot of questions as to why can't you come in that side, are you being overly officious, is it again that can't rather than can do mentality. So I looked into that, and it's absolutely clear that you can come through that way, but if you were to do that, you have to create a walkway. If you create a walkway, you no longer can have 100 car parking spaces over there, you have 20. So you can do it, but there's a compromise and a consequence for everything that we do. Now, if you were to try and do both, like some would ask, so you create both a walkway and have 100 car parking spaces, let me tell you what, heaven forbid, could happen. Somebody gets hit because you've designated that a walkway, and it's not you as members that are liable personally. It's not you that will be compromised in terms of being negligent. it's actually probably not even the executive. It's actually the board. We would personally be liable if somebody got hit and we didn't reduce those spaces. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that the decision making that we take is actually a can do, but it superficially gives the impression that you can't. And again, that's all due to a lack, I think, of understanding and proper communication, and we've got to work on that, and we've got to explain the decision making better, and we've probably got to, where possible, make changes to decision making in the off season. But at times, if the rules change, we've got to implement it, but we've got to be better, as I said, in spreading that message. So I do think that there is a lot of misinformation out there. What I would say is misinformation and comment obviously increases and amplifies when performances aren't great on the pitch. That's obvious. Everything just goes up a few notches, and everything gets a bit more personal, and the criticism increases. And can I just say, criticism is absolutely justified, deserved, and warranted. Absolutely. That's sport. It's an emotive game. It's full of passion, and it's full of care. And long may that continue. Absolutely. Criticise, be constructive, or not, if you want to be. But the only thing that I would say is that when criticism crosses that boundary and it becomes threatening to staff, and it becomes so damaging and slanderous, we will absolutely take action. We will report matters to the police and the authorities, which we have done, and we also will rely on our constitution, which is quite clear about standards of conduct for anybody that's associated with our club, and whether it's beneficial to the game, or indeed the club, or indeed the ECB. And also, unfortunately, and we've seen this across the whole of sport, and it's not just Worcestershire. I speak to other counties, and I also speak to people in other sports. There has been an increase in kind of entitlement or poor behaviour, and again, that will be stewarded. We want a safe environment. We have a zero tolerance for any form of discrimination, any form of abuse, and we certainly will not tolerate disabled people being abused. And that is what sadly happened on Thursday. I'm not going to get into the detail of it because the police are looking into it. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we've got criticism is of course warranted, especially when you're not performing. But when it oversteps the mark, we have an absolute zero tolerance for it, and we just will not tolerate it, as will any other worthy sports club. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it has been a difficult period for us. Thank you for your support. There will be very extensive reviews. We want to understand the whys of it better. We want to set up a members forum, or members representatives, so you can understand the decision making in a bit more detail. And then Sarah and the whole team will provide you with a more detailed update, and then we'll answer your questions. But thank you.
So good morning, everyone. So I'm going to start with an update on more operational issues. First of all, just a couple of things that were brought up at the last members forum, so to round those off. There was a question around the guest passes that members are allowed in, and clarification around that, which we have done by email to members, but just for everyone's information now. So it's the premium members and life members that can, over the course of the season, can have up to 4 vouchers, and the executive members up to 5, so that they can bring a guest in on the County Championship and Royal London match days. Those complimentary tickets are claimed from the ticket department, so you just need to make arrangements for them ahead of the actual match day that you want to bring someone in with you. Also around members of the opposition being able to come into here, into the members bar in the Graham Hick Pavilion. At the start of the season, our concerns were around, was there going to be enough room for our own members, as we've needed to put this screen in place for part of the area being used for the players' dining, that's our anxiety was around, was there going to be enough room for everyone? So we've been monitoring that, and it has been sufficient space through these the first 3 matches. So we're pleased that we're reverting back to allow visitors to come into this space on the County Championship and on the Royal London matches. And another question was around during the lunch interval, spectators being able to go onto the pitch, to be able to stretch their legs, take a look around. That's a local decision for each of the county cricket clubs, and there's certainly been a mixed response around. Some counties have allowed it, some have not. Hence why there's been some additional guidance that we've been able to get from the ECB around this. There are a couple of factors at play. Obviously the ground staff need to be able to undertake their work, bring on machinery if they need to. Players need space so that they can do any training that they want to do during that time, and any warm-ups before the session recommences. So we're really pleased that we're going again, that we're able to review this and allow spectators into some of that area. What we will need to do each and every day is a dynamic assessment of which parts of the outfield are available for spectators to come onto. So with yesterday having the history talk and memorabilia going on, today we've got an exhibition of walking cricket that is going to happen in that lunch interval time, that will take up space on the field. So we're looking to recommence that from tomorrow's play. What parts of the pitch, as I say, it's a dynamic assessment on that day of which areas, so listen out for the announcements on that as to what parts of the pitch will be available and which entrance onto the pitch spectators will be able to use to get onto there. And the other question that is still coming up, that's been covered off before, but just to go back through, is around the bag searches that have been implemented for this season. It is a very important counter-terrorism measure that we need to have in place. The UK terrorism threat still stands at severe, and it is vigilance that keeps everybody safe, and it's something that we won't compromise on that. It means that depending on the crowd size as to whether that is just a sample of bags and spectators coming in, rather than when we have a very large crowd, it's necessary to check everybody. And it's certainly now become a way of life. Certainly for myself, West End Theatre, my bag was checked. Just last month I was at the Hay-on-Wye Literary Festival. Everybody had their bag checked to be able to go into that area. It is a change in the times that we need to adapt and we need to work with. Then some of the issues and questions that we've had that have cropped up with the T20 matches. Certainly the first match, which is the local derby Birmingham Bears match, that was our largest crowd that we'd had in for 3 years. It did have problems. Fanos has already touched on and already talked about the regulation that was enforced around not being able to bring food in. It was something that was already in the ground regulations, but obviously had not been enforced previously. And really just to reiterate the thinking behind that, because I know there are some people that were thinking, well, is this just to make people buy food when they're here? And really to say categorically that is not what it was in our minds when we were looking at this decision. This is around safety, this is around the size of bags that people bring in. When we have a full house crowd, that becomes a much bigger problem for the space that those take up, as well as the security risk around them. As has already been touched on, we reviewed that policy straight away that day. We reassessed it, we reassessed the risk to safety, and looked at what could be done to be able to ease those issues, and made that change straight away. and communicated that and adopted it for the very next match that it came in, that we were able to react to that.
Good morning, everybody. In terms of catering and queues in kiosks and bars, as Sarah's just alluded to, the Birmingham Bears game is the biggest attendance we've had for the last 3 years, so there was certainly some learns from that. We also employ a company called Moneypennies. Moneypennies overlook Lords, Old Trafford and other sporting venues as well. So they've actually given us some really good pointers in how we can shorten queues. So for those that have bought in the Diglas and in the Stowford Bar in games after the Birmingham Bears game, you'll notice that the maximum queuing time so far is 4 minutes. 10 minutes is acceptable, so at the moment we're way below that. But there are some other things that we can do as well. But no, in terms of queues and learns from Birmingham Bears, there are a number of things that we've already put into place, and hopefully you'll see that for the rest of the season.
And another issue, again, touched on earlier, but just to talk about that a little bit more, around instances of crowd behaviour and antisocial crowd behaviour. Interestingly, I was on a briefing with the ECB last week where this was being discussed. It is a sport-wide problem, and certainly across cricket and across all the counties that have encountered more instances of poor behaviour this season than before. The view around that from the ECB's Safety and Security Officer, after the pandemic, the phrase that's used is that there are an element of spectators that come to matches with a sense of entitlement. I've paid my ticket, I've bought my ticket, I will behave how I like because I have a right to, which we disagree with. This is a family environment, and we want to uphold those values. Alcohol fueled sometimes, but also increasingly instances of illegal drugs as well being more of a problem within sporting venues.
Good morning. So we've had 2 instances of late, one at the Birmingham Bears game. Can you hear me? Sorry. One at the Birmingham Bears game, which was over by the cathedral entrance. That was just people that had a few too many. One decided to jump and for joy because we were winning and managed to spill his pint over the man in front of him. The man in front of him took umbrage to that and threw his pint back at the man, and then they all just decided that they wanted to have a go at each other. Both of those people were ejected from the ground and we have not returned since. So the more disappointing incident was last Thursday. We had a group of 12 people from a local rugby club, cricket club, and they were sat over in the stand. They were being very, very rude, very aggressive and using very bad language quite a lot of the place. We had quite a lot of complaints on that day from the people sat around them. We asked them on numerous occasions to please tone it down, we're a family club, don't say that please. And after the 6th time we've asked them to do that, we asked them to leave, in which time they said they're not leaving, they're not going anywhere. We asked them to leave quite a considerable amount of time. We had to call the police in the end and they dealt with the matter. Okay.
Can I just add something to that, Sarah? Is that okay, yeah?
In terms of alcohol-fueled people, we don't have alcohol-fueled people, or we try not to have alcohol-fueled people. We have a policy here that if you look under 25, which I'm not in that category unfortunately, then we will ask for ID. Somebody that's walking around with an orange wristband on has been ID'd, which means that they can get served at the bar. I think we've had a few instances potentially where the driver of a group will go and buy the beer. Now they can only buy 4 drinks at any one time, so that is a policy that we adhere to here and the bar staff are aware of that. But it's quite difficult that if there is a group of 12 people and they have 2 drivers and the drivers are buying the alcohol at the time, so we're not actually serving somebody that is intoxicated, we're serving somebody that's actually stone cold sober. So actually from a stewarding, and I use the word loosely, policing point of view, we just do need to ensure that doesn't happen on a regular basis. But I think Thanos has mentioned it, Sarah's mentioned, and certainly Helen has there. unfortunately, we are in a time, a changing time, so we need to be more vigilant. We've certainly done a lot of work since Thursday and the Birmingham Bears game, but please be reassured that we want you as members to have an enjoyable time here, and we will ensure that actually takes place.
Members were invited to submit questions in advance of today, so there are just a couple that relate to the operational side of things, so let's just cover those off now before we move on to cricket. So Helen, question for you to answer. When will the car parking capacity be increased to use the spaces such as the grass area by the burger stall?
Hello again. The unfortunate thing is we are not allowed to use that area anymore. We had Sports Ground Safety Authority visit last year, and in their report they put down that they didn't want cars driving through people. This would mean that if the cars parked on that area, they'd have to get here before we opened, and then they wouldn't be allowed to leave until we've closed. So it's not possible. They are very high and hot on this. They've come to us again this year, and they've reiterated to us they don't want cars driving through people, which is another reason which Faust mentioned about the main car park. We'd have to cordon off a walkway to enable people to come in that way, which again would take the car parking away. Plus the fact, I know that some people are saying that we don't let people through there. If the stewards do see people that can't walk or are struggling, they do actually let them through. They walk to reception, they get their tickets clocked in for them and take it back to them. So we do let the disabled through if they look to be struggling and we don't think they could walk to reception. So yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you. Another question, is the relocation of the players' dining facilities into what was previously the members' dining area temporary or a permanent situation? Well, it will certainly need to remain here until we have another solution. Now, we are looking at options around it and continue to do so. In likelihood, that might be when there is further development on the site, but it is something that we continue to review. It will remain this way for the rest of this season, but what we may be able to do ready for 2023. And then the last question that I've just got here that was submitted, at the bar at the Graham Hickey evening, all the male customers around me were asked whether they were members to get discount, and I was not asked. This also happened to a female friend of mine the same evening. If the club wants to be inclusive, then these things matter. Dave?
Thank you for that. We are inclusive. I can assure you as of today, because it was brought to my attention today, that ladies and gentlemen are welcome, be all members, and they will be asked the same question. So just as of today, that's been briefed. So if it doesn't happen, I would like to know. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to beat about the bush here, but I do want to give you a little bit of background. The T20 campaign has been an absolute disaster. Let's not beat about the bush, that is a fact of life. But I want to take you back to the start of it, and the start of it being that we signed 2 overseas players in Dwayne Bravo and Colin Munro. At the time that we signed them, the negotiations were that should Chennai Super Kings not qualify for the finals of the IPL, Dwayne Bravo would be available for 14 games. Colin Munro was available for 14 games because he wasn't involved in the IPL. Colin will have played 30 by the end of the campaign. He missed the first game because he had problems getting his visa in New Zealand. And DJ decided that he needed a bit of a break after the IPL and he wanted to go home for a week, which meant that he missed the first 4 games. Now those first 4 games were 4 away games against, in my book, probably 4 of the strongest sides in the competition. Imagine what that did to the mentality and the wherewithal of the playing group and the coaching group upstairs, because they know that they are light going into those 4 games. I said at the start, I'm not going to make excuses, and I'm not. We didn't perform perhaps as well in those games as we might not have. Hopefully we thought we were going to turn the corner a little bit. Having said that, the performances since then have been absolutely appalling and way below the standard that any of us, whether we be staff or whether we be members, expect. And we know that, and that will be addressed. That will be addressed. But I want to look at the positives. And in the first half of the season, we've played some really good cricket in Red Bull. Let's not lose sight of the fact that we are up there and competing in the Championship. And there is also one more competition to come later on in the season in the Royal London. There is a hell of a lot to play for. The players and the coaching staff know that we've underachieved so far, and there is a real desire and a passion to put that right, and we have to put that right. But I want to really make sure that we all focus on the positives. There's been a lot of negative stuff flying about on social media. Fortunately, I don't do social media. My idea of social media is nipping down to the pub with a couple of mates for a pint in the evening. And I'm not too interested in what they've got to say, to be honest, because the only thing that people ever put from what I can see on social media in terms of cricket is that they tend to be negative. We, I think, have to be collectively positive from here and look to support the boys we have out there, to support the coaching staff, and to support all the people who are trying the best to make us better and make us improve. And I think that has to be what we all buy into. I can tell you from experience that during my own playing career, and I played here for 17 years, we won the Championship in '74, just after I'd started, and then there were about 14 lean years until we had the successful times of the late 80s. And there were a lot of times during that period of time when things were a darn sight worse than they are at the moment. We still have a lot to look forward to. We've got a Championship to look forward to where the boys are competing well, and we have the Royal London. And we have to take the positives and look and be positive and make sure we support in the right way.